Nigeria, at least since 1999, has been passing the buck. Each president comes and passes the buck. That is why your perception of each succeeding government is that the previous one was better. Is that Nigeria as a country cannot run on one policing system. Nigeria has to run on at least 38 policing systems. Based on what we have and what we are doing, we cannot produce good police officers at scale. If you're not contributing something positive, you don't have the capacity to drive positive change. You find people castigating their leaders and they are breathing traffic lights of himself. And the man, by the way, the president himself, goes out of his way to know what's going on. He has a system where he makes sure that he's abreast of what's going on the street. It's the structural change that President Bola Tinubu is bringing about. Now, these decisions by themselves automatically help Nigeria to generate wealth, but they are just the beginning. The good side of Peter Obi is that he doesn't come off as intellectually layered. He cannot be Nigeria's president. My name is Japheth Omojuwa. I'm a writer. I'm also a ghostwriter. I'm a book collaborator. I'm a public speaker. I'm an advisor to people and organizations. I'm very interested in stories, in memoirs, in whether it's autobiography or biography, democracy, governance, young people, the evolution of society, trends, other such things. That's a tough question. Because of where I'm coming from and how, whether through my own ability or through divine help and blessings, I've looked back and a lot of things that I saw as challenges, at the time that they happened, they were challenges, but I look back and I can tell some stories of certain good things that happened to me or that went on to happen that was on the back of those challenges or those bad things. So these days, it's difficult for me to even know what is a challenge or what is not. I always see these things as opportunities. It's difficult for me to see something as a challenge. Frankly speaking, challenges, opportunities, sometimes they look the same thing. Problems, opportunities, oftentimes they look the same way. It really depends on how you look at them. And fortunately or unfortunately for me, I don't see a challenge, I see an opportunity. For me, regret is a waste of time. I'm very big on picking out lessons. I'm very big on reflecting on situations and like, was this the right thing to do? For me, it's about the functionality of the decision. I don't believe in regret. I believe in the power of time, and I think that you will always make mistakes. In fact, your mistakes actually make your life better, especially if they were not made because you wanted to intentionally make a mistake. There are generally two things that determine the things that happen in the future when it comes to an individual. The first thing is the things you have control over, and the second is the things you have no control over. So my commitment to each moment, to each decision, to each day is to put in my best and make sure that I'm making the right judgments that inform the best decision per time. That's my commitment, and I do my best to put in a lot of thinking, a lot of strategic thinking. They used to call me strategy in back in unit. To put a lot of strategic thinking into the decision, to filter my judgments, and to then take my decision, knowing that I was trying to control what was within my control. I'm well aware that there are certain things that were not within my control. When the future comes and my decision turns out not to have resulted in a good outcome, I do not blame my decision. And I do not blame the outcome. I just accept that certain things were not within my control. But if I gave it everything, thoughts, judgment, decision, and action, I have nothing to regret. I just move on. And if there's something to be learned, I learn it and I move on. I think positive change begins with the person. If you're not doing something positive, if you're not contributing something positive, you don't have the capacity to drive positive change. Change is not external to the individual. Change is internal. Oftentimes, we externalize the responsibility for change. Change is internal. You find people talking about bad government in Nigeria, and they are driving on the
one way. As they are doing the one way, driving against traffic, they are abusing their leaders. They cannot connect their behavior to the state of the country. You find people castigating their leaders and they are breaching traffic lights. You find people well educated with all the degrees, you find them parked waiting for the red light and they are parked on the zebra crossing. They, the tragedy of these behaviors and the other ones that I'm not able to mention, the tragedy is not that these people do them, it is that they are not conscious of them. That's what makes it worse. That's a double layer tragedy. The first layer is that they commit these wrongs. The second layer is that they are not even conscious of what they're doing. Because if they were conscious, then they would caution themselves, then they would not do it. Then they would even have more clarity as to the state of the country or the society and how it got there. So Nigeria's biggest tragedy is not that we have these challenges, is that the people that are supposed to help to bring about the change, you and I, are not even conscious of our own place in making the society become what it is. We're always thinking of what the other person should do. So you cannot tweet about or post about positive change. You cannot bring it about if you've not brought it about in your own space. You have people with big houses spending lots of money, buying jewelry, feeding their pets and all of that. And you ask them, how much do you pay your driver? Or how much do you pay your chef? And when you hear the amounts, and those same people are self-righteous enough to think that if only the country could fall in their hands and they would do well. I'm sorry, the lesser is in the greater. The greater is in the lesser. You cannot build a skyscraper without starting from the small stones, without starting from the sands that you cannot count. And if you don't understand it like that, you cannot make change happen. Change begins from that individual, and that's where we must start from. For a second, forget about who is supposed to do what. What are you doing? So when they come to that understanding, when they come to that thinking, then they will automatically bring it to bear. The populist answer is to say no. There's no pressure. I don't have any pressure irrespective to maintain relationships or anything like that. I say what I want to say. It doesn't matter whose ox is gored. There's no pressure. That's the populist answer. Do you want the truth? Now, let me give you the non-populist answer. And I'm not just going to speak for myself. I'm going to speak for everybody that is doing something important, that meets with important people, that have allies and associations. You are always under pressure. You know why? Human beings, we are all hypocrites. All of us. And it doesn't make us bad. It just makes us have a brain. The only difference between me and, I guess, the average person is that I'm aware of my hypocrisy. A lot of people are not. I've had friends get published on news platforms, and they're calling me, including highly placed people, calling me that, please, can you help us get this thing out? And I'm going out of my way to help them as much as I can help them. And when you think about it, that's not supposed to happen. But because we are social animals, and because part of that reality is that you have your own allies, you have your own camp, you have the people that don't have are the people that are either, unfortunately, have lost their mind and so they are walking the street, or they are not important enough for anybody to ally with them. Go and read history. Every civilization, every warrior, they all had allies. They all had houses. If you watch Game of Thrones, it was about houses. It was about aligning. And that also meant that when you're making your decisions, you're conscious of not hurting your allies, because in a certain sense, hurting your allies may even come to you, whether directly or ultimately. So yes, I am very conscious of that position. I'm very conscious of not hurting my allies, not hurting my friends, my people. It moderates how I talk and what I say. And by the way, it moderates it to the point that I also start to think that if I'm not going to do it to my friends or my allies, then I don't want to do it to another person. Actually, I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever said this publicly. In 2017, I told them to stop posting on my blog. I told them to stop posting news on my blog. The blog is still there, omojuwa.com, but I told them to stop posting. Why? I stopped posting myself, but other people were posting. I had people and they were posting. And I had people always reach out to me to say, JJ, I thought we were friends now. What's this thing that you're posting? Or JJ, this thing didn't happen. I just got tired of people reaching out to me this and that about what had appeared. And I was like, please, no more posts. Just end it. I left it for historical reasons. I like historical. I don't like that when a website goes down or stops, that you should clear it. Like I wish we had 2, 3, 4 next on the internet, even though they don't still post. I wish that you could still read the story. So because of that, I left it. But it was actually, this was the pressure that made me actually completely stop an entire business, just because I did the math and I realized that the relationships were more important to me than the continued existence of that platform as it was. So I stopped it. So I can tell you without a doubt, not just for me, but for everybody that is doing something important, that has allies, that knows people, that has connections, that if this thing is fully functional, if it's optimized, they definitely are pressured by that. And that's why I understand people that avoid being known. Sometimes people think anonymity is cowardice. No, it's not. It's because once you start to go out there and you start to shake hands and you start to have dinner and breakfast, you're not an animal. You've had dinner with someone, even if you don't like the person. You've had dinner with the person. You had breakfast with the person. You've said hello. You shook hands. You look into each other's eyes. You just are not going to go on the internet and say what you used to say about them, how you used to say it, because you're human. To go back on the internet and still say it how you used to say it and not consider the relationship and not consider the person and not consider the fact that you met them with their husband or with their wife, you saw their children, and not consider the consequences. Because oftentimes we do the things we do because we don't think it through. But when you know someone, you start to think it through. That should, first of all, moderate how you behave with respect to that person. But what I found is that eventually also moderates how you behave with other people, because now you start to think beyond your single layer thinking of what you want to do to the person. You start thinking about the multi-other effects of your actions on this person. So yes, the thing is, first of all, there's growth, right? You as a person, you are just doing your thing. You're not yet vast in self-interest, and you find yourself in a world where, or you later realize that people look more after themselves and they don't look after you. And then somehow you wake up to that reality, and then you start to say, okay, from this point, I'm going to start thinking about myself. I don't like to talk about individuals. I don't want to talk about names. So I'll speak in terms of the principles of relationships generally. And for me, it's really about, I'm always going to be that person that is going to look out for you. I'm always going to be that person that is going to stand with you and defend you. And initially, I was also that person that didn't even think of myself at all, initially. I was the one that was like about the big picture. I had an opportunity to meet a former president. It was a given. It wasn't like, oh, it was a given. If I had said yes, then I'm face to face with that. I was offered even a meeting in secrecy. But because of my allyship at the time, I didn't even tell my allies that, oh, this thing has been availed. I didn't tell the person that I was turning it down. I told the person, let me go and think about it. But I knew that I was turning it down. I knew I was not going to come back because I didn't want to meet that person. Because I didn't want to put myself in a position where I was going to be telling the president no, or even have to take that. And I later learned in school about when it comes to decision making, it's better not to even put yourself in a position where you're having to take that decision, right? So, but before I even knew it about this principle, I didn't put myself in a position where I didn't go face to face with the president. So I'd made these sacrifices, and thankfully we got power. And upon power, I think 2 years in was when it dawned on me that even though I was in this group amongst these different people doing our bits, and my thinking was we were fighting for this big picture, Nigeria and everything, I soon came to realize that, okay, maybe it wasn't so much about Nigeria alone, if it was even true about Nigeria. It was also that people were defending their positions. And I realized that I had to just mind my business. So, and the thing I also do is when I'm not cool, when I'm not as close to someone again, I don't go on the internet and start to let people know that I'm not as close to this person or whatever. I just know I know that I'm not as close to them. They know that I'm not as close to them, because part of the closeness is that you see often and you talk often, you discuss ideas. Now, it doesn't mean that there was a fight with anyone because then you could see people. So for instance, when I got appointed to Kashim Ibrahim Fellows in 2018 on the board, I was surprised, because by that time I wasn't seeing the governor that appointed me. So There was a time in the relationship, if I got that appointment, I would have taken it for granted. Like, yeah, this was supposed to happen. Like, we're cool. I think I'm befitting of the position. But at that point, I was surprised because I was not in touch with the governor anymore. So it was a big surprise for me. Now, I wasn't surprised that I was appointed in terms of my capacity or ability, but in terms of my association, that this person even remembered me because I wasn't seeing the person. I wasn't going to the state. I have an email from him that was like, "Hey, you're traveling everywhere. You don't even come around." Now, I'm not unaware of the perception of the outside world that, and in this world, actually, in this world, not just Nigeria, in this world, literal world, perception is reality. So I'm not unaware of the thinking that, oh, I had certain assets, all my money must have been coming from these assets and everything. But I knew, and those that were close to me knew that nothing was coming. I wasn't getting, no, I didn't even get the chance to supply tissue paper. Tissue paper is listed, maybe toothpick, to that state. I was just doing my thing, traveling around the world. Thank God I was blessed to do the things I was doing, assessing opportunities. So I also had learned by that point that when the time came to take a position on these macro issues, I also had to think about myself. I didn't think that time was going to come because as time went along, things seemed to align. There didn't seem to be any reason for anybody to go in different directions. I was still cool. I was still cool with APC replacing APC. I was cool with a Bola Tinubu presidency, and my allies, my major allies, were aligned with that. Now, if a situation arose, which did arise, that any of them was not going to be cool with that, in the past, I would have most likely gone with the direction of those allies, especially the older and more experienced allies. But because I had learned my lesson about thinking for like, what do you want to do? What is in your own interest amidst this macro reality? And so I knew that the Tinubu plan, the Tinubu agenda I was so to it, irrespective of what anybody did. More so when those other bodies were not consulting me as to what they were going to do. So maybe 12 years ago, I didn't need to be consulted about what anybody wanted to do, but I think that I have come to the age and position and situation where if you consider me your ally, I should at least have an idea of the judgments that were going into your decision. What happened on the internet this year, where I had people attacking me, calling me all sorts of names, people that used to be my ally, telling me that they gave me an iPad. I thought it was unfortunate, but how I see it is that I don't think they are bad people. I think people would say things or do things according to how much they know, how much their cognition or their thinking ability or their morality is able to carry that. So I'm not going to sit there and start to blame anybody. I probably also have said or done things. But bottom line is that our politics did not align. It wasn't a fight. As I sit here, I don't think I'm fighting with anybody because I didn't fight with anybody. Our politics just did not align. I'm taking a different position from their position. I'm not going to follow anybody in any direction. I'm going to look at the situation, make my judgments and follow. And in this case, at this particular time, I'm fully supportive of President Bola Tinubu. I'm fully supportive of Governor Ubasani. In the context of the question that I answered, by the way, because it could be other, and I'm fully supportive of Nuhu Ribadu, and that's what it is. I haven't thought about Reno Mokri, so I don't have views on Reno Mokri. If I got a chance to, but I think about ideas, I think about perspectives, but I don't have views on Reno Mokri because I haven't thought about Reno Mokri. You said that our positions seem to align. I don't know if they do because I'm blocked by him. So if we were aligned, I wouldn't be blocked, right? Or maybe the blocking is on account of where we are coming from. But I haven't actually thought about him. I just think that if it aligns, then it aligns. If it doesn't align, it doesn't align. I think in terms of the macro picture, and the macro picture for me is the governance. Let me break it down. Nigeria, at least since 1999, has been passing the buck. Each president comes and passes the buck. That is why your perception of each succeeding government is that the previous one was better. I'll explain why. If I live in this room and I sweep this room, but instead of packing shit, I just put it to the side. I put the dirt in the room to the side. I don't even do enough sweeping, but the little I sweep, I put it to the side. The person that succeeds me comes and also puts it to the side. By the way, don't forget this thing is piling. The person that comes after that puts it aside. The room will smell worse per government. Every succeeding government is going to administer a worse smelling room than the previous government. What Bola Tinubu, amidst other things that he might be doing that might even be wrong, and is a government, the beauty of opposition is that if you are smart, there's always something that you can criticize. Always. For a government, especially a government of 200 million plus people. In any part of the world, the average government, even if they are doing excellently well, there's always something that is bad that they are doing that you can criticize. But the one I'm talking about is the structural change that President Bola Tinubu is bringing. Subsidy, to start with, was each government saying it won't be me. Even though they all knew that this was not the right way to spend our collective wealth. They knew that you shouldn't spend the collective wealth burning fossil when you could be building bridges or building schools or building health centers. They knew that. But they also knew that the politics was costly. It was going to be a costly thing to do, because what it was going to do was going to have multidimensional effects on everything. And it was going to have immediate effects that made it look like you, the government, are bad, even though the long-term effects guaranteed to be good. No question about it. So this person comes and actually does that thing that nobody could do. Not say wanted to, nobody could do. Because to say you want to do is different from to do it. He actually does it and stands his ground, one. Then he looks also at the exchange rate. There was a time I didn't used to do this travel thing where the government gives you USD. Not because I was a nice guy, but because I don't have time for the processes. And then one of my friends told me, I think this was maybe 2022, one of my friends told me, let me collect your BTA now. I'm like, how does that work? I don't have time. They're like, no, I know someone at the bank. Bottom line, by the time they did that thing, I realized that I had gained 400,000 naira on that trip. And I knew that you could do it 4 times in a year. And by that time, that 400,000 naira could cover your flights. And if you're not going to stay in a Hilton or some Waldorf somewhere, it would actually also cover your accommodation. So 4 times in a year was 1.6 million. And I realized that the government could actually fund your travel as an individual 4 times in a year, both your tickets and your accommodation, based on that BTA thing, based on the differential of the exchange rate. And it didn't have to matter whether you were working for the biggest companies, multinational companies that were not even Nigerian companies. It didn't have to matter whether you were traveling to go and do adultery or fornication. It didn't matter what you were going to do. As long as you could do that BTA and do it 4 times, you could. In that moment that I was doing it, I'm sure there were times the numbers were bigger. And how do you build a country where people that had the resources, the access, the ability to afford travel were being funded by government as far as the whole of their flights and the whole of their accommodation? I'm using this single example. There are multiple examples you could give in the forex administration, the cost of the arbitrage to our country, that in that single moment I was gaining 400,000 that this person gave, but it was on my head, right? I just could not take it. Like, how can this? Now I knew this was happening, but this was the first time I was experiencing it directly. Like, they're funding my flights and my accommodation, and I could do that 4 times in a year. And that's the life we lived as a country. And we thought we had a country. And then, by the way, the biggest beneficiaries were people that had power and access to government. So by design, it's not something that a government should do. By design, let's be clear. It's not something that a government should do, because when it comes to access and opportunities, when you have power, you get it, especially in Nigeria. Then the government comes and decides, we're not doing that anymore. If you're traveling, access dollar at the cost of dollar. Access pounds, Dutch marks, there's no Dutch mark. Access all these currencies at the cost. Let the market decide the cost and go and buy it or not. People don't think about these things in terms of scale. What that meant was that the money that was covering the billions of dollars that Nigeria was paying, basically paying the rich by design, who travels. That money then becomes available for other things. Last year, governors got as much as 6 trillion naira extra. People forget that in the early days of Buhari, the Buhari government, the federal government had to find other means of getting money for the governors to pay salaries and amongst such other things. Now, nobody's even talking about any governor that is not paying salary now is very intentional about not paying because there's money. Now, the unfortunate thing that could happen now, the problem that we could have now is not the problem of shortage of money, it's the shortage of ideas where people will go and put the money in the bank at best. By the way, if you're a governor in Nigeria today or in the past and you put money in the bank, it means that you are bereft of ideas because there are just too many challenges that requires interventions. In fact, you should be borrowing to build because you don't even have enough to build the things that need to be built, right? Not borrowing to steal because people really get these things confused, but that's a different thing entirely. So I hope we don't have a situation where because people are bereft of ideas, they just start to steal the money. Because when people don't know what to do with money, they waste it. It's just human nature. Otherwise, I expect to see a spurt of development just on account of this liquidity. And it's just the early days because there's also the other part that is going to happen, the tax. The tax reforms are going to put Nigeria in a situation where, again, we generate wealth. Now, these decisions by themselves automatically help Nigeria to generate wealth, but they are just the beginning. The other side of it is that on account of the structuring, the global economy is going to look at Nigeria and think, okay, now we can do business here. And this is not my opinion. All the major credit rating agencies, whether it is Fitch, whether it is Moody's, whether it is, what's the other one? Fitch, Moody's, and the third one, I'm trying to remember the third one. All of them, in fact, two of them upgraded Nigeria to stable. One of them had Nigeria unstable, which means that you can put your money in this economy. And it is already showing. So when I say commitment to Tinubu, I'm not talking about the person. I'm talking about the fact that me and this person are fully aligned on this thing. Now, that does not mean that if I look at the entire government, I don't have things I'm not happy about. I do. But the things that he's doing are so consequential that 50 years down the line, if Nigeria is not unfortunate to have a leader that reverses it, 50 years down the line, the children and the adults that are alive now, they will look back and be like, thank God this was done. And before you even look at the future, which sometimes is hard to look at because a lot of people cannot imagine things. They don't have the power of imagination. Just look at the past and look at how those decisions that we refused to take and the ones that we took, look at where they led us. So it was clear that we needed a paradigm shift, and this President Bola Tinubu, is dispensing with that paradigm shift at huge political cost, has to be said, at huge political cost. It takes a lot of bravery to take some of the decisions that he's taking. And it's not as if those decisions are not costing him, because we have a population that is more moved by opportunistic politicians that actually come and say the things that you want to hear, even though the ones that are brilliant, they know that they are lying to you, and the ones that actually are not brilliant, they don't even know better. So they can only fall back on opportunism. But I can tell you free of charge that these three decisions are consequential, not for the moment, not just for the moment, but for the future. For sure, like for instance, I heard that they're trying to ban solar panels. I think that's an unfortunate decision. Why? We did it with rice. We said we wanted to produce our own rice, internal food security, and all those slogans. That ended with expensive rice, unavailable rice, which made rice expensive, and smuggling. We did it with cars. Oh, we should stop importing cars, blah, blah, blah. Let's produce our own cars. It's been almost 20 years now. Yes, we have car companies, but we're not anywhere near the sort of country that should be setting up its citizens to be paying the sort of money that they're paying to buy cars. And what are people resorted to? They're buying cars that are way older than necessary. So we've done, and there's probably other examples, but these two are enough. We've taken this sort of decision on two major fronts that have shown us that this is not the way to go. You end up actually punishing your population when you take decisions like this. Nigeria is not in any position to ban the importation of solar panels because, first of all, we're desperate for energy, one. Two, we're desperate for alternative energy because we don't have the resources to provide energy via the conventional means, right? So we're desperate for alternative energy. Our industrialization that we need to build needs alternative energy. And three, we don't just have the capacity. You can design a system where you can encourage the solar panel making companies to say, look, we'll give you these incentives if you're able to produce. I'd like for Nigeria to be, we've had a very strong telephony culture, economy for 24 years now. We should be producing phones in Nigeria. But if you're not intentional about your development, nobody's going to come and start doing anything for you. But if you're intentional, you find out that part of your deal is that in the next 5 years, you have to start producing this thing in my country. If you're going to be taking these resources or taking these inputs into your production. It's the same thing with the solar panels. I'm sure some of the inputs in solar panel production, I'm sure we have them here. We could have an arrangement with some of the solar panel companies, whether in China or Germany or South Korea and other such countries that have the capacity. Let's find a way so that we don't lose completely, because the design where you're banning solar panel importation just on account of some is often false patriotism. Patriotism is not abstract. Patriotism has to stand on something. So I cannot, out of patriotism, decide that it's green rice I want to be eating because Nigeria's thing is green. If green rice is not healthy, I'm not going to eat green. So patriotism must be in the not just in the slogans and sloganeering. It must involve sound judgment and decision making. And personally speaking, I don't think banning solar panels is a sound judgment, considering the state of Nigeria as it is. The future of Nigeria is devolution. A Nigeria where individual states, at the point it was regional and it did work to some extent, but we don't have the regions again. Now we have the states. A Nigeria where the states are as empowered as possible for as many things as possible. And I think one of those things has to be internal security. Doesn't mean we're not going to have our police. We'll still have our national police. Is that Nigeria as a country cannot run on one policing system. Nigeria has to run on at least 38 policing systems. That's 36 police systems in the 36 states, one in Abuja, and one national police system. A future will come, maybe in 50 years or 100 years, where the local governments will need their own police. Like or whatever they call them at the time, maybe they'll call them counties, whatever. Because they will become so big and so complex and complicated later that they will also need their own police. It's about population, it's about systems, it's about the economy becoming sophisticated. As that happens, you have to rebuild your layers, and you have to layer it up in such a way that you have enough numbers to meet the challenges and the opportunities. We started in Nigeria where it looks like one police was okay, but today we must already know. I don't even think we should be having a conversation about state police or no state police. I think the conversation should be about how do we even make it happen. And so I think that needs to happen, and that needs to happen as soon as possible, because what then happens is that if the national police were to be incompetent, if a state has a competent police, they moderate the incompetence of the national police massively. If a state happens to have an incompetent local police and we also have an incompetent national police, it's them and the national police that will suffer it in their state. What we suffer now, let's even pretend that the national police is competent. I don't think there's any Nigerian that will tell you that I have an appreciation for the work that the police does, but there's big challenges when it comes to policing. As it is now, there's big challenges. They don't have enough resources. We don't prioritize the welfare of the officers, like their family, their food, their retirement benefits, and other sort of things. People look at the police and they expect them to be better, but they don't look at the police and think about what goes into making this person. What goes into them? You see, what goes into them is not enough to make them a good police officer. It's not. If you see a good police officer, if that person is an accident or that person decided that they wanted to be, it wasn't because that the Nigerian system as it is helped to produce our police. Nigeria cannot produce, based on what we have and what we are doing, we cannot produce good police officers at scale, right? Leave that on one side. But on the other side is that let's empower the states legally, as we have done with devolution of power when it comes to power generation. We have to also do the same thing with police. And I think for many other things, the future of Nigeria has to be devolution, where we center responsibilities in the subnational government, starting with the state. And I think as we go on, it will also spread to this smaller or local government. I think to start with is to admit that we are different people. Diversity can work, but it cannot work if you don't first of all admit. You cannot solve or heal a disease you don't admit exists, right? So we first of all have to admit that we are not united. Start out, we are different people, we are not united. Now, how do you unite? You have to unite on the back of justice. And justice for me is for each nation amidst this Nigeria to first of all understand their place amongst themselves first. I've been in parts of Nigeria. I was shocked. In 2013, I was in a part of Nigeria and we had done the training and we had shared money for transportation. And one of the guys that benefited that we shouldn't have given his money to this guy from something I don't want to mention because the message you get lost once you mention. Like all these bad people now is from something north. You shouldn't have given this person from something north because they always cheat us. This other person was from the south. But the only difference in where they came from was north and south, which are English words. Inferentially, they actually are the same tongue. They speak the same language. They have the same history. But because one was from the north, another was from the south, this person was speaking to discrimination. So this macro reality of the big guys and the big ethnic groups fighting, it doesn't even get lost when you go down to the ethnic groups themselves. Within the ethnic groups, there are tensions. And it's because when humans come together, there's always going to be tension. There's people are going to storm. You have limited resources. People are always going to fight and challenge for these resources. What you then need to do is you need to define rules of engagement. Now, that's where Nigeria has not done well. We've not been able to define the rules of engagement because our criminal justice system is weak. To start with, our criminal justice system is weak. If you went to court for a land issue now, one of my close people got a judgment. Actually, they got the judgment and they actually also got paid for the judgment, but it was after almost 2 decades. People have died, and these are the things we need to set up. So Nigeria has a design problem that is costing us in terms of our unity. And it also goes back to what I said about devolution. If you center power and responsibilities in the states, the need to be obsessed about what happens in the center reduces. Because at the end of the day, it's not people don't go to Abuja because they like Abuja. They go to Abuja because Abuja is what holds the power and the money. But the more responsibilities you put to the states, the less. If as a state governor, I can build a strong, extraordinary police force, I don't have to go and meet the IG and be discussing how to help, how it can help me make my state secure. Now, there will be reason to meet the IG, even if I have state police, but the reason will not be as pressing. It won't be as pressing as in now. You have 36 state governors. Each of them has to meet with the IG because of security. As limited as the position is, because if it wasn't limited, we wouldn't have our military in virtually all our states. If we start this conversation, frankly speaking, we cannot end it. But the bottom line is, we have to admit and accept that we are different people. There's no shame in admitting that. And we also have to develop a country where the criminal justice system works so that if I want to get something and somebody comes to do something to me and I go to court, I can get justice. And that justice, I get it irrespective of whether I'm Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, Ilaje, Ijo, Ishakiri, or Nukwe, or whatever, right? Why do people take a piece of Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi or Michael Jordan or LeBron James? If you follow football, if you follow basketball, I don't know how much of basketball you follow. The NBA especially, it's as though half the conversation is about LeBron James. The remaining half is about other things that also involve LeBron James. But it's like, because you're LeBron James. Lagos is the Michael Jordan, is the Lionel Messi, is the LeBron James, Lagos is the GOAT of governance in Nigeria. Lagos is the other Nigerian states have access to TV and cable TV, and they can look at New York, they can look at London, they can look at Adelaide or Sydney or Dubai. They can look at all these places and desire to be like them. But Lagos is their closest example to what they could be. And that's a beautiful place for Lagos to be. But that also breeds some form of jealousy. To the point that somebody then comes to Lagos, find their path, find their way, and then they, like you said, they start to piece on that same city. There's an element of what could have been for some of these people. That what if you had this Lagos where I come from, I wouldn't even have to come here and be pushed around like I'm being pushed around. But it's not the fault of Lagos that you found yourself here. You saw some value in Lagos. You got attracted to that value, and that Lagos brought you here. And by and large, Lagos has blessed most of the people that came here. The kind of pressure, people don't understand the kind of pressure Lagos faces, and I'd like to give you an idea of the kind of pressure that Lagos faces. Go to the point of entries of Lagos and see, and these are not people that travel that are coming back. These are people that have come to their own London. They have come to their own New York. Lagos is their Japa. people actually forget that as they are looking to japa abroad, there are people that are looking to japa to Lagos across the country, and they are coming in droves. What Lagos is dealing with, no city deserves to deal with it in terms of the population pressure that it's dealing with. And don't forget, Lagos is not a special economic zone or a special political zone. Lagos is still a Nigerian state. So it doesn't get an extra. In fact, which brings me to the second point. Now, that Lagos generates some economic outcomes and also challenges. So it generates, on account of the pressure from all these people and all the economic activities, it generates a lot of challenges. Those challenges are met by the state, like all the other states are meeting their challenges. But the economic outcomes that those challenges generate, Lagos then has to share with the other states that in a way are the ones putting some of the pressure on Lagos. So by design, Lagos is in a disadvantaged position because one, it is taking all the pressure of the entire country on its economy. It's carrying, it's like Atlas, you know Atlas, right? It's carrying in this case, it's not the entire world, it's carrying the country. In fact, it's also in a place where physically it looks like it's even carrying the country on its back, right? Physically in terms of the map. But in the real sense, it's actually carrying the country economically. We just need to look at the numbers. Look at it. When you look at when we do national averages, they tell the truth, but they also, people say go in the direction of the facts. It depends on what facts you're looking at. You can look at facts on Nigeria and it gets lost on you that you're looking at averages. And once you individualize the numbers, you realize that a lot of the chunk of these numbers came from this place, because in that realization then tells you that there's a dysfunction with your system, because one point cannot be generating this much to the point that others put together at certain times don't even match up. That's a faulty economic design. And then that same point has to feed all these other points, even though these other points are not feeding they're not helping to meet its challenges. There is no reason why Lagos should be a Nigerian state as it is. There is no reason, because it's bearing the burden of the entire country, the population explosion, the economic pressure of the entire country, and then the resources that it manages to generate, it then has to also return. Now, if it was returning to keep people back home, that would help, but that's not what is happening. So Nigeria has a lot of work to do, but like I said earlier, amidst all these challenges, there are certain fundamentals that we need to treat. I like that we're addressing full subsidy. I like that we're addressing FX exchange. I like that we're addressing the tax system. Presidents come in and they want to do everything. The human brain is like that. You actually want to do everything. Each administration must decide what it wants to leave as a legacy, and then hope that it meets it at the end and then pass it on. I think eventually we'll get. If I want to be funny, I'll say thank you for that question. And those that are on Twitter will understand what I mean by thank you for that question. But I have an answer to the question, so I'm not going to say it. I have a good answer to the question, and I can think. So I'm not going to tell you thank you for that question. First of all, I don't like to talk about individuals, but I know that there are certain levels an individual attains that you cannot run away from being talked about. E.g., if you are the president of a country, you cannot come and say, why are you talking about me? If you're running to be president of a country, unfortunately also, you cannot come and say, why are you talking about me? So in that sense, I can talk about this person because he's aspiring to be the president of my country. And he's already lost 2 elections. And in my opinion, he's probably going to lose the 3rd one. He lost the first one with Atiku Abubakar in 2019. He lost the second one in 2023. Now, to Peter Obi as a person, first of all, I'm going to start with the credits. The good side of Peter Obi is that he comes across as someone who is not given to the Nigerian big manism. Some people think he fakes it, but I don't think he fakes it when the man carries his own bag. Now, I understand why a politician wants to be pictured joining a queue or carrying his own bag. If it's going to benefit your brand and your image, it's fine. But there are just some things you can't fake. And I think that in that respect, I don't think Peter Obi is faking it. I think he's not personally given to that Nigerian big manism. Do I think he overplays it? Yes, I think he overplays it, because why are you caught eating in certain situations? Why are you not just doing the eating? Why are you? So because it's worked for him, he's now expanded. And that's also okay in terms of building a product. But outside of that, when he was governor, Peter Obi was not considered as one of the shining lights of the time when he was governor. Now, irrespective of your position on these individuals that I'm about to call, generally speaking, there was a perception that they were the stars of their time. If you mention Donald Duke, that perception stands to this, that he was perceived as somebody that was getting stuff done. And whether you agree or not, it puts at least Calabar and the festival and a sense of order in place that's filtered enough to Lagos and other parts of Nigeria. You could mention a Fashola, and no surprise when Peter Obi met them, he was treating them like I'm a fanboy. I think I even heard him say, "I want to be like you." If he was joking, it shouldn't have been a joke. They were star governors, and it wasn't just because they were star or they had charisma. It was because it was on account of the results that they did. With respect to Peter Obi, when you write history, yes, is dynamic, but a good history captures the time as a picture. So when Peter Obi was governor, what was being written about him at the time? That is not to say that there are no people that were writing bad things about him just to make him look bad, because that is normal. People are going to write bad things about you. But when you filter all the possibilities of people that might be writing bad things about him and people that had nothing to gain or lose, that just were saying it as it was, you realize that Peter Obi was at best an average governor. Peter Obi was a governor that didn't care for the quality of roads that he built. And these are not my opinions. I'm reflecting what has been written by people. Peter Obi was a governor that didn't care about the quality of roads that he built. If he built at all, he just would build sharp. And I use that intentionally, like, let's just build anyways. Peter Obi was a governor that didn't mind playing people against themselves. Catholic, Anglican, he played that politics. And this is not my opinion. Anybody that is angry about hearing this should not be angry at me. They should be angry at either the person that did it or the people that said it. There are videos of different people. There are tweets that spoke about how this person played on the difference, the ethnic, that's the subcultural ethnic now, not the, and the religious differences, how especially played his Catholic politics strongly, and his appointments reflected on that front. Actually, if you even pay attention, if you look at his obedience, there was a time during the 2022 election run-up where Peter Obi posted a picture of his strategist, supposed strategist, and first of all, they were all men and they all happened to be Igbo, right? It's a reflection of this person, like a presidential candidate posted his, and he had to delete it, which shows you that I'm hoping that he realized I was wrong or he was embarrassed. Whatever it was, he deleted it. That's who he is. That is who he is as a person. I don't even think it makes him a bad person. I just think it is who he is. He doesn't come off as intellectually layered. It shows in his answers. Whenever he tries to go above his intellectual level, it's accident upon accident. Peter Obi was one that said the issue with our foreign exchange is our foreign exchange. I have not heard something, but I'm trying to answer this without making the person look bad. So I'm doing my best to not come across like I'm trying to represent the person in terms of what he has been presented as. Not even, I haven't started with my own opinion now. I'm trying to say in terms of what he has been presented and how he has presented himself. I don't think there's any Peter Obi supporter that would look at his interview with, what's this, Zain Asher on CNN, I'll be like, that's my guy. No. If they say that's my guy, it's because they are insisting that he's their guy, not based on the content of the interview, where it looked pretty bad. Even the interviewer, who to me must have wanted him to be president, you could see the frustration on the face of the interviewer. During the interview, like, you could see the what's going on here look on that person. So there's a former obedient who has renounced the movement, who said, I read it this morning, interestingly, who said that some of the videos he has been seeing that make Peter Obi look like he's clueless, that unfortunately they were not even seeing it when during the campaign, that they just were blocked. Either they had blocked people that were sharing the videos or the algorithm had commandeered their timeline. They just were not seeing most of those videos. That he feels used, that he found himself in a position where he was actually supporting something like that. But that's one person. Let's speak to there's a mass of people that are very strong on Peter Obi as president, that when he was governor, they only had negative things to say. This is not one tweet. This is not two tweets. It's multiple tweets. And I saved a lot of them. And I read a lot of them. So I know there's multiple tweets from these people that portrayed an idea of a man that some people wish that stoned him. Some people said he was the worst governor ever. Now, in Yoruba, they say, Jalode Toridowe. The word then got to a place where the man is in a position to be president. And I understand. that because they prefer him, they are willing to overlook the shortcomings that they saw in the past. But they cannot then force that on me as a person or some other person. They cannot force us to not see what had happened in the past or what they said in the past about him, right? So in that case, when you bring it together, he doesn't have the intellectual depth to be president. He has the fortune to find himself in this place where Nigerians were angry with the establishment in 2020, protested against the government, NSAS, and they look for the likeliest person to challenge. And he, on account of certain platforms, including literally the platform, Ojo Imade's platform, he had portrayed himself as being in the establishment, but not of the establishment. As per when I'm in the car, I don't even let them buy fuel in the car behind me. I make sure that I'm in the car when they are buying it. By the way, I don't think you can be a good leader if that's how you run a system, that you have to be there when something as tiny as buying a. It's a reflection of his incapacity as a leader, that he doesn't think in terms of systems. He thinks in terms of the person. That I shut this down. It was the governor when this Okuzu River thing happened, and there's people that said that that SARS, that particular SARS, became that SARS because of the orders that Peter Obi gave. And it wasn't also surprising that he refused to go to be at that panel. He went as far as getting an injunction that prevented him from going to be on that panel. But I don't begrudge those that want him to be their president. I do feel for them that he will not be Nigeria's president. Not will not be, he cannot be Nigeria's president because he doesn't have the range to play the politics that would make him president. How do you know this? People get angry when you say certain things, but when they sit down, I've met obedience that have met me, and we have this conversation. I'm like, yeah, you're right, because in that sit down, there's no room for noise, and your father is mad, your mother is mad. There's only room for debates, and when we put it together, they're like, yeah, you're right. And part of how I know I'm right is that some of the things that he was lacking in the run-up to the last election, he's trying to do, except that he's not doing right. You know why? When you want to align, the best time to align was 30 years ago, when you were not going to run for president. So it's organic. You have friends in different parts of the country. They can tell stories of your times together in school. They can tell stories of holidays that you took together, birthdays that you came to do, sums of money that you contributed to this or that or that. So it's intertwined. You're of different parts of the country, but you're actually so together that you're almost inseparable, right? What has happened in his own case is that it looks like he's forcing it, because he's now had to go out of his way to be donating, to be talking about things out in those areas, to be seen to be meeting with politicians from those places, to be seen to be eating food in the plates of children and feeding the children. If you remove yourself from the picture and say, I don't want to be an obedience, you look at this and like, you actually be irritated by the seeming desperation of it, because it doesn't look organic. If you see me, I'm not trying to be president of Nigeria, but if you see me amongst people in the north of Nigeria, you're not going to be shocked, because I'm there. They are my friends. That's my home. I relate with them like it's. I have companies with them. I have businesses with them. I have a life with them. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and somebody will be like, this guy is making moves to the north. No, I'm not making moves to the north. I'm with the north. I relate with the north. They see me as one of them. They trust me with their ideas, with their platforms. They share things with me. And that's what, despite succeeding enough in politics to be a governor and to serve a Nigerian government, he never was that person that I could say, outside of where he is from in Nigeria, that he had strong relationships. And it reflects in his setup. Even today, maybe when they watch this interview, they start to try and adjust it, and you will see when it's being adjusted. But even today, when they set up teams, national teams and all of that, you see that those teams are not reflective of the people in the areas. They are having to bring people from other parts of Nigeria to lead teams. Look, the evidence speaks for itself once you remove yourself from the picture and you see it. And why do I think this guy cannot be president? The Nigerian political system works in such a way that, unlike actually most places, the people you vote for, you didn't decide them. The people don't decide who they vote for. There's a group of people that decide who you end up voting for. And outside of the people you are going to vote for, you're not going to vote for me in 2027 because my name is not going to be on the ballot. So the person you are going to end up choosing was chosen by a select group of people. Peter Obi doesn't have the capacity to win a primary election in any political party, any mainstream political party in Nigeria. He does not. But luckily for him, he knows that because he does his best to not put himself in a position where he has to run in a primary. But the beauty of the primary is that it tests your political capacity. It's like when you're playing a multi-level game. If you're running from the first level, it will cost you at the upper level. So Peter Obi finds himself in PDP. He knows there's going to be a primary and he knows he's not going to win it. So he runs. He comes to Labour, where the Abures of this world were gracious. They saw that he had built some kind of following and they decided, which I thought was smart, to not put him through any primaries. They handed it to him. If they have a primary in Labour Party today, he's likely to sweat. They're talking about some coalition. Were that to happen and were it to join, outside of them outrightly, first of all, I'll tell you free of charge that he will not join that coalition if they don't promise him the ticket beforehand. He will not. Because he knows that he doesn't have the capacity to win a primary. He has the populist persona on account of the perception of him being this person that doesn't do the big manism that I talk about, and also him knowing certain things that people want to hear and then saying it. He has that, but that doesn't work in primaries because primaries, whether Nigerians like it or not, primaries is a collection of people that want more than populism. They want that they can sell you across the country, not just on Twitter or where you're from, across the country. They want that before they talk about whether you can even win the election, they look at it like, okay, you can get 35% in 2/3 of the country. He's not that person even today because, again, I don't think he thought he was going to run for president in the past, because if he had, he would have been doing the work as a young politician, building the bridges and all of that. When they say bridge builder, it's not something you do during elections. It's something that your life is about. That when people think of you, they know that they're not just about where you're from. You're about the Nigerian identity and the Nigerian political culture, where you're not just about where you're from. You actually are able to attract. You're seen with people from other parts. You've done things with them. You've gone to battle with them, whether as an advocate, as an activist, or as a politician, or as a business person, right? These are things that he has not been able to do, and it makes a big call on his ability to win primaries. Peter Obi, for instance, I can tell you free of charge, if you hear that Peter Obi joined the coalition, rest assured, they promised him the ticket. Because Peter Obi cannot win the primaries of any mainstream political party. If he stays in Labour Party and they decide that they're going to have primaries, he's either going to try to run away from it. Because he also doesn't do one thing. He doesn't play party politics. He just trusts in this group of people on the internet that they're not big on thinking. They're big on reacting. They're big on moving as a group. As the former governor the former governor of the central bank, the current governor, Ambrose, called them the headless mob, which I think, when you look at it, actually applies in terms of how they react, how irascible they are, how they are quick to talk before they think. Actually, they don't think. Maybe a few of them do, but the non-thinkers seem to take center stage in the way they move, the way they do the things that they do, the sort of curses and insults that they throw at people they disagree with. So he has a huge belief in these people. They are the ones that also decide and control what he says and how he does, even though he thinks that he controls them. But that's a different conversation. So his party could be in disarray. And I'm not speaking my opinion. I'm talking about things that people that were with him have said. People like Kenneth Okonkwo, for instance, and other people, how they will tell you that it tells you he doesn't want to take any side. Now, a leader has to know when to say, okay, this is what I would like to happen. How can we make this happen? And help people, make others see why they need to go in that direction. You don't run away from a fight. If you run away from the fight of a political party, which by definition is at best the third largest political party in the country, how do you want to fight terrorism? How do you want to fight banditry? How do you want to fight hunger and poverty? How do you want to fight unemployment? How do you want to fight housing? How do you want to fight all these consequences of our challenges if you cannot address the simple things? By definition, a leader must be ready to step on toes, especially the leader of Nigeria. A leader must be ready to take tough decisions. Peter Obi is a people pleaser. I don't know whether that is strategy or who he is, but he's a people. He wants to please everybody. You cannot lead Nigeria if you are a people pleaser. A multicultural, heterogeneous, complex, complicated, hugely challenged country like Nigeria requires people that can put themselves through the test of fire that party politics require. He doesn't play party politics. He runs from the challenges of party politics. ABGA, PDP, Labour probably will run away from Labour. He runs away from the responsibility of doing the work that requires you to go through a primary and win a primary. He doesn't play at that level. He wants to jump to the top. Now, the design of the system is such that it doesn't allow you to jump to the top. And if you find a way there, he finds a way to let you see why you should never have done it in the first place, which is why he has now come back to try and do the things I didn't do, like looking to build the bridges, looking to connect with the North and other sort of things. But it will be too late. I think something Nigeria needs to manage is the allocation of resources. I'll let him understand that helping to manage allocation of resources doesn't necessarily require you for you to be watching how it is done. It's not a good use of your time. We'll get him to understand the essence of designing tools and systems that can then help manage that allocation. But because of his commitment to things like that, I will put him in a place like procurement, where if you go to him and say that you want to build a school for 5 billion naira, he's likely to say, wouldn't that build 500 schools? And now you then have to make an argument to him to say that this is not just blocks. We're going to build softwares for the students. We're going to bring electronic boards for the students. They're going to have their tablets or laptops. We're going to pay for certain intellectual properties for the students to access. And then it gets to a place where you have to make the arguments. We're generally in a place now where, and this is good value for him. We're generally in a place now where people don't actually question these things well enough. What then happens is that oftentimes we're paying more for things. I think he would do well in a place like that, but even then, you have to let him understand that an individual does not make things happen in that sense. An individual can have a vision, but first of all, you have to commit to building people, one, and then you have to commit to trusting them. If you don't trust people, you cannot lead at scale. You cannot imagine me as tiny as I am saying that they cannot buy fuel in my car, except I'm in the car. The day that they will need that car for emergency and I'm not there, what's going to happen? So he has to start thinking in terms of systems. He has to think in terms of systems, in terms of building things that can work even when you're not there, things that can work even when people are not hearing your voice or seeing you. But in terms of as a person, I think that is frugal in nature, to the point that that sense of thinking can apply in how we allocate resources. I think first of all, my relationship with him, it's a relationship of trust.
So people actually think he's paying you.
Yeah, they have a right to think so because we are close, right? So it's fair for people project their reality on you. So I don't argue with people's projections. I just live my life. Seyi knows, Seyi ST, he knows that it doesn't pay me. As I sit here, he hasn't given me any opportunity that like made me earn a naira. It's a relationship of mutual trust and respect. I'll say something here that he's one of those people that has helped me to make change happen using the tools of government. Because when I see certain challenges, now I try not to bring everything to his table because I know his table is quite full for an individual that was not voted to do anything. But when I see certain things that I feel need to be addressed, I actually take them to him. And I have also gone back to him to say, thank you. I've seen change happen. He cares about this country. He sees himself as somebody that God has put in a position to make change happen, even though he's not directly the owner of the mandate. He's seen himself as somebody with access to the mandate, and he's doing his best to help bring about good outcomes. I feel privileged that I have that kind of access to him because he doesn't have to. First of all, he can listen to me, but he doesn't have to do some of the things I do. I don't. It doesn't owe me. I didn't vote for him, right? He's not a governor. He's not a president. He's this. It might as well just mind his business, right? So I don't take it for granted that he's in that position where, and I'm sure I'm not the only one where, as a young person, not necessarily even like young person, as a Nigerian, I'm able to get him to help us make certain things happen. And by myself, I moderate myself not to do that too much. But it's not a money relationship. It's not a transactional relationship. He hasn't said, "Oh, JJ, I would like that." By the way, he hasn't said, "JJ, oh, this contract, I'd like for you to do it," or anything, right? But and that's what I actually like about it, that he knows that I'm not about, and I like to be prosperous, but I'm not about that sense of transaction. I really care for the opportunity to make change happen. So if I have access to someone that can make change happen, I'm not thinking in terms of how can I use them for myself. I'm thinking of how can I help them be useful to the larger mass. Because as an individual, no matter how much you care, you still need other people to bring certain things to your table. And in fairness to him, he actually goes out of his way to ask me certain questions about certain things. And I don't want to jeopardize a relationship like that by making it about myself, because it can be so easy to make it about yourself, which is why the people that think that I'm making money out of him, that's what they would do. And that's why I don't blame them. People often, I used to be in a position where I would ask people during a speaking engagement that if you met Dangote, what would you do? And most people said they were begging him for money. So I get why people would think that certain relationships that people like myself use them to make money. I get it. I understand why people think like that, but my mentality and theirs are not the same. In terms of his dad, a leader can only do so much, right? And I think that President Bola Tinubu has taken certain decisions that will have consequential effects on these countries for years to come. I think what needs to happen before the next election is that we need to start seeing a situation where those outcomes are already even beginning to see in terms of the resources available to the subnational governments, for instance, or the foreign direct investment, or Nigeria's economy being seen as stable. Those are good outcomes. I like a situation where those outcomes now start to have, you can actually see the apparent effect on the lives of Nigerians. And I know that ST himself is fully committed to this. So in that sense, I don't think he would have any expectations of his dad that the man already doesn't have of himself. And the man, by the way, the president himself, goes out of his way to know what's going on. So I know that he calls people that are not in government, people that are not the type to mince words about the state of Nigeria. He goes out of his way to call them and like, how far with this situation? And he gets feedback. So apart from reading papers, which also you don't have to even fully depend on, he has a system where he makes sure that he's abreast of what's going on the streets. But a time will never come when a Nigerian president will satisfy everyone, because we're in a charged political system, increasingly charged, and people are playing people on people. People are trying to create a design where you hate people, but once you're able to remove yourself from, just maybe not permanently, just one day, just let me just remove myself and see things differently, I think you will see clearer. There was a time I would have been able to answer, because my answer would have been negative, and I try not to say things that depresses people. But at this time, I'm quite bullish on account of what I already said, which is that the structure, the fiscal structure, the economic structure of Nigeria that needed to be sorted is currently being sorted. I don't think it will be sorted completely in this administration, even if they were to spend the next 6 years or so. But I think that the fundamentals that need to be sorted are being sorted. And what needs to happen is that the next government that comes to succeed them in 2031 will continue in that direction. Now, they might have their own ideas, but there are certain things that we cannot afford to be reversed. Because Nigeria, for a long time, was a country that literally was taking the money and giving to the privileged and depriving the mass. I gave an example in the subsidization of travel for the privileged, that the sort of money that would change multiple lives, just one BTA would change multiple lives, and then an individual just travels, burns fossil with the plane, burns whatever energy on the bed when they sleep, wherever they go to. Those changes excite me because they also put, and even the exchange rate, there are decisions that have multi other positive effects. Now they also had negative effects. But you see, the thing about people understand things on an individual level. They don't understand that those things also happen on the macro level. If I go from 9 to 5 to wanting to do business, if it's not that somebody is giving me loads of money to do that business, if I'm using the money that I saved from my 9 to 5, I'm going to go through a period of challenges where I'd have to reduce. If I'm used to buying 5 bottles at the club, I probably have to even stop going to club at all, or reduce it to 1 bottle, or sharing with other people. If I was living in a place where my expense was 7x, because I'm now trying to save money for this business, I'm going to reduce it to 1 or 2x. I'm going to make those sacrifices, and it will reflect in the food on my table, the size of my food, the kind of food. Nigeria is sort of in that position. So if you've ever been in that situation where you've made a tough life decision that you know will have a big effect on your future, but in the immediate will see you having to pay the cost of that decision, then you should just see it at a macro level, that's where Nigeria is. And I think anyone who's ever take such a tough decision would definitely understand the point I'm making. But if you have never had, I pray that you get an opportunity to, because oftentimes the most successful people are people that had to take decisions that didn't look convenient when they did take. Fatherhood has not changing me. Fatherhood is changing me. It's an everyday awareness of my person. I mean, the first change that happens when you are a father is that you become a new person. You go from being you to being a father. You know, when a child is born, many people become immediately born. A father is born, an uncle, an aunt, a mother. So in my own case, it was a father. It was also the realization that it was a full. It's different from knowing. It's goosebumps. Like you feel that sense of awe for the responsibility that has been handed to you, and then you then come to realize that anybody who has ever said I'm self-made is either the greatest liar in the world or the biggest fool in the world, because you realize that without a human, another human cannot exist. A child is the most fragile thing in the world. There are animals that they give birth and the children immediately can exist. For one reason or the other, the human is not like that. The human cannot exist without the care of another human, and that for me is profound in a certain way, because it tells me that even after we become humans, like adults, on account of muscle memory and how we evolved, we always need one another to continue to be nurtured and to continue to grow. But I said it hasn't changed me. It is changing me because every day I'm discovering new things about fatherhood that excites me really. I don't care. I think that I answered the question much earlier in the interview where I said that once you've taken the best decision at the time you're taking it, the rest of it is no longer in your hands. So however people perceive me is theirs, is they can own it. The good thing that I already see at the moment is that there are different layers to my personality to start with, and then there are different perceptions to that personality. There are people that think I'm the worst person, and I've seen it actually. There are people that I've seen it on the internet. There are people that think that I'm better than the devil, and I see that as a compliment, by the way. That I'm so bad and they mean in a bad way. I'm so bad. I'm better than the devil. I see that as a kind of compliment, because it shows that whatever I'm doing has so much effect on them that they recite so much faith in my ability to be so bad and so better than the devil. And there are people that almost can swear by my name in terms of my ability, in terms of my personality, in terms of my care for people and society. And when you put that together, when all is said and done, it means that I'm doing something right, because the tragedy would have been that if those people You ask them about me and they said they were indifferent. So if I'm doing enough to command the kind of passion, whether the passion is hate or love, it doesn't matter. As long as I'm doing something to command the kind of passion that I command, and the passion is also layered. I don't have this situation where people think I'm a good person, which would have been a lie, right? Because it means that there are things I'm not showing them, I'm hiding from them, or that they completely think I'm a bad person, which would have been sad, right? Because it means that I must really, really be so bad that everybody thinks I'm bad, or I'm not showing enough of my other side. So I'm in a position where I'm perceived as a human being, and I think that's fair enough. The rest of it, take care of yourself.